Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show sponsored by 888 Sport. This is your Irish Christmas racing preview. I'm your host George Elek and I'll be joined today by Andy Holding and Rory Delargy, as well as 888 Sport ambassador Barry Geraghty. Stay tuned to hear which horse Rory wants to back to win by 10 lengths.
I find it hard to be against him. The best of his form is outstanding and it's miles in front of all of these.
Andy has a strong view on the tussle between Ferny Hollow and Rivier D'Etel.
Certainly based on the time figures that we keep. She's the fastest 2-mile novice either side of the Irish Sea.
And find out if Barry Geraghty thinks A Plus Tard can be beaten.
I just got the impression that they feel there's improvement in him, that he has improved from last season. But no, I can't see anything trouble him.
Yeah, delighted to be joined by Rory Delargy and Andy Holding for this look at some incredible jumps racing over in Ireland over the Christmas period. Rory, how does Christmas look for you? Is it a time to take stock, spend some time with family, or are you going to be spending all of Christmas Day trying to work out the what's going to be going on over the days that come after?
I think if I want to spend any time with family next year, I'll need to be spending a fair bit of it with family between now and the new year. So quiet enough from tonight through to Boxing Day, a few bits and pieces, but never switch off entirely. But this is a very busy day for me, with the decks coming out for Boxing Day / St Stephen's Day, depending on what side of the Irish Sea you're on. But I can relax from tonight onwards. He said, hopefully, touching wood.
Yeah, well, I think we're all in a similar boat where, from this evening, we're recording this on the 23rd of December, Christmas Eve, if you will. Hopefully we're going to get a couple of days to rest and relax. But I must admit, I did have a quick look at the Maidan card this afternoon. Couldn't find anything, sadly. Andy, what's your Christmas day like? Are you there, making the bread sauce, roasting the potatoes, basting the turkey?
I found, to my experience, that I'm probably better off keeping out of harm's way and just playing with Edward. Really, I think that's the key. Occupying him, that car will get on with the main event, as it were, in the preparation for sort of like a mid-afternoon feast, and yeah, just keep him in check. So yeah, that'll be my day, and then probably just slide off towards my computer late afternoon, straight early evening when his batteries are running out to start doing my column for Boxing Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Childcare, followed by eating loads of food, followed by finding some winners. Sounds like a pretty good Christmas day to me. Let's get into the racing and the way we're going to do this, because there is plenty to get through. Sunday, Boxing Day, or St Stephen's Day, as you say, at Leopardstown and at Limerick, and then just some cracking races throughout the early part of next week as well. Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday at Leopardstown, providing some titanic tussles between some big names in the game at the moment. So we're going to start on Boxing Day and work our way through wherever we can. We're recording this nearly a week ahead of the racing next Wednesday, so some of the prices may change. We'll do our best to stay on top of them. There may not be prices for some of the races we're going to try and cover, but in an attempt to try and give you as broad a preview using both Andy and Rory's knowledge, we're going to try and get through all the graded races on those days. And we'll start with the 110 at Leopardstown on Sunday, the 26th of December. It is the Knight Frank Juvenal Hurdle, grade 2. And Fedor is the favourite at the moment at 4-6. Luna Power 3-1. Britska 6-1. Calvados 14. 6 feet apart 20s. Rebel Step 25s. And Scenic Look 50-1. Andy, come to you for the first race of this Irish Christmas racing preview.
Yeah, the juveniles so far, either side of the Irish Sea, have been pretty poor than they have been in previous years. Zana here, just for using him as an example, last season he clocked a number way beyond what we'd normally find this time of the year. This up to this point, this time last year, and along came then Calixios as well. So we had two, proper Grade 1 Irish juveniles come this meeting last year, and this year we've got Fedor, who's been the best so far in Ireland, but to all intents and purposes, he's almost favourite by default because there hasn't been anything remotely anywhere near good enough to touch him up to now. And even over here, we haven't seen a other than probably the skeleton horse that won at Warwick. I kind of forget him a little bit. and Sky Cutter has clocked a couple of good numbers for Phil Kirby. We haven't really seen anything over here either that set the juices flowing. So it's a division that really needs to catch fire sooner rather than later. I'm a little bit disappointed that Ben Seagal isn't in this race because being of the same connections of last year's Boodles winner, I would have thought they would have probably wanted to dip their bread early to find what they've got with him. But it's interesting that Nolmead's cast him to one side and he's letting Luna Power have another crack at Phil Door. Of course, the two of them clashed 28 days ago at Fairy House. It was the Bar One racing meeting, wasn't it, when we saw all the big races like Hatton's Grace, etc. So we had a rough comparisons of how good they were to the older horses. They came up a little bit short on the circuit time sectionals and the overall time as well. So I don't think it was a great race, but it was a good race between them. They went hammer and tongs to the line, and Phil Door just came out on top. There's an argument to be made that Luna Power has got half a squeak of turning the form around. I thought if he would have jumped the last a little bit better, that might have ruffled the feathers as a favourite. But as it stands, it looks between the two. I'd imagine that Phil Door, without seeing any prices, will be 4-7, 2-on. Luna Power.
I just gave you the prices 4-6, 4-6
right,
at the moment.
Sorry. What price is Luna Power?
3-1.
3-1. Yeah, that's pretty much how I would say it. Britska would have to improve on his Fairy House win, and the others don't really do a great deal for me of what I've seen them so far. So the value is definitely with Luna Power, but the Irish Juveniles just haven't set the world alight so far. And if this is a reflection of how good they are, we're in trouble.
I mean, I do often wonder if the listeners and viewers of this show treat me the same way as you do, Andy, and just clock off whilst I'm talking and wait for you or the other guests to start speaking. On that note, Rory, I better stop talking and get over to you to find out your thoughts on this 110 at Leopardstown.
Yeah, my thoughts are remarkably similar to Andy, and I was convinced when I looked at the decks for this in the first place that Ben Seagal was in it, and I'd have been really interested in him. He was very impressive when winning on his hurdles debut at Punchestown, and I thought he was the type who would do really well as a juvenile hurdle. I'm sure he still will, and I thought if he was in this race, you'd have got a reasonable price about him because he'd have had about £10 to find with the top pair. But the fact that Nolmead relies on Lunar Power, as Andy says, strictly speaking, he's wasted to turn the tables because he's receiving £3 now from Fedor, who carries that the penalty for his Group 3 win, Grade 3 win last time out. I wouldn't say that's necessarily enough to stop him winning if he is going to be as good as he looks like he might be, but strictly on the figures. Lunar Power's got the same chance as him. It doesn't make me want to have a punt on them. The only other one that I would give a mention to in here, I agree with Andy. There's a couple. You've got a couple of the fillies who ran at Aintree in that listed hurdle. That was a poor contest. The Irish filled first 4 positions in that. Really tough conditions that the British juvenile fillies just couldn't cope with. And they were finished in the first 4 places almost by default. It's not particularly strong form, and I don't see either Calvados or 6 Feet Apart playing a part here. It's worth giving Rebel Step a second look. He's about 25-1 or possibly bigger than that. Now, he fell in his debut in the race that was won by Ben Seagal at Punchestown, but he was in 3rd place at the time and going okay. Whether he stays 2 miles over hurdles is the question mark with him. He was a miler on the flat, but he was a better horse on the flat than any of his rivals here. And he was still learning the game come the end of it. He ran well to be placed off a mark of 87 on soft ground at Cork in September, and that's the best piece of flat form on offer here. He's just a little bit too keen for his own good, and he didn't look an easy ride for Danny Mullins at Punchestown, but he does have plenty of ability, and if Andy Slattery can harness that, then in terms of class, he's got half a chance here. But he took a reasonably heavy fall on debut, and you wouldn't be rushing to back him on the back of that. But if he drifted to 40s or bigger than that on the day, that might just be too big.
Rebel Step there, 25-1, one to keep an eye on, but no strong view from either Andy or Rory in the first race of our preview. But we'll move on now to the 220, and Ferny Hollow is the 4-5 favourite in the Racing Post Novice Chase. Rivier D'Etel with a mare's allowance 13-8, Curse Sublime 12-1, Grand Bornand 20 to 1, Gallant John Joe 66s, and Zoffany 66s. Rory, we'll come to you first here, and a lot of intrigue here between these top two, seeing a lot of shrewdies, a lot of sharps making the case for Rivier D'Etel to topple Ferny Hollow.
Well, she's got the best form. At the weight, she gets an awful lot of weight. Being a filly and a 4-year-old, she carries 11 stone 1, whereas Ferny Hollow's got 12 stone. I think the 13-pound difference could swing this. In terms of what they've done over fences so far, she is the pick of them. Yes, she's more exposed, but she's had 3 runs. She's improved with each of those. She was very impressive winning the Clarence Davis at Navan, and prior to that, she'd won with ridiculous ease from Cape Gentleman, who'd looked at a decent prospect himself. She beat him by 21 lengths in the Craddockstown at Punchestown, and if she runs to that level here, I think Ferny Hollow will struggle to give her the weight. He's been very exciting since day one, Ferny Hollow. I didn't think he looked entirely natural over fences at Punchestown himself, but he got better as the race wore on, and that was a strong, for a maiden chase, a beginner's chase rather. That was a pretty strong field. So at the end of that, I was reasonably impressed with him. But in terms of what they've actually achieved, Rivier D'Etel sets a decent standard here. And with Ferny Hollow being an odds-on favourite, there's only one way I'm going here, and that's with her.
Rivier D'Etel the way to go for Rory. Andy?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rivier D'Etel. Certainly based on the time figures that we keep. She's the fastest 2-mile novice either side of the RSC by a country mile so far this season, courtesy of that victory last time out at Navan in that Clarence Davis. She sped eagle the field from a very early stage, never looked like relenting, and they weren't top class horses behind her, but they were useful. Obviously, Drill Deal was in there as well. Take All, who finished second, he's now back number. He'd won well and beat a good field the time before at Wexford, and they were strung out like washing. She won with any amount in hand, and her time figure would have been good enough to be in the first 3, if not win the Arkle for every single Arkle in the last 10 years. Doesn't mean to say she's always going to run to that time figure.
Yeah,
but she is capable of running an absolute world-class time, like a complete out the ballpark time. I think she'll always do it under the circumstances of i.e. having an uncontested lead, when she's able to row around boat from the front in a small field, because I think that's when she's at her best. So if she's taken on, for instance, out of a comfort zone, and Willie Mullen's team wanted to rough her up a bit with perhaps Grand Bertrand and kind of like be a bit of a spoiler, then it might be a different kettle of fish. She might not necessarily always run to that massive speed figure that we got. But if she's let alone and she gets into the rhythm she got in at Navan, then she's certainly got to put it up to Ferny Hollow, who, of course, had a relatively easy time of things when he won on his chase debut. This will be a total different ball game. She'll be going at a pace that will have a lot of these out of their comfort zone. And her jumping is very, very good as well. She sees the stride from a long way out. She's a good operator. The track will really suit her, the way the fences come up. And I think she'll still be in front 2 out. And if she is, she'll keep galloping all the way to the line. I'm not a weights and measures man, so I'm not really one for looking at the 13-pound weight for age. But it is there as an advantage. If you see it as a massive advantage, I just go on the time figures. And she's quicker than Ferny Hollow up to now. And that'll do for me.
So by that reckoning, without the 13-pound mare's allowance, would you still have Rivier D'Etel as the favourite between the two?
Yeah, it's just an added bonus. I like if they both carry 12 stone, I've got Rivier D'Etel. It wouldn't. I'm not looking at that and thinking, oh my God, like that's going to stop me off betting. But the fact that she is, as I say, it's an added bonus. If it's got to be considered as some kind of advantage, isn't it? How big an advantage, I don't know, because she's a 4-year-old and the other horse is a older, bigger, stronger horse who can carry the extra weight. So it's all relative. So yeah, I'm a big Rivier D'Etel fan, and I think if it goes according to plan, I think that 10-1 for the Arkle will be a dim and distant memory. Because at the moment they're betting, I think Ferny Hollow's favourite for the Arkle, is it not? Unless I completely.
So at the moment we've got Ferny Hollow 9-4 fav, Rivier D'Etel 10-1.
I mean they're betting 9-4, 10-1. And here it's like 8-11 and 6-4. So they're very, very closely matched. They should be a lot more closely matched for the Arkle. And if Rivier D'Etel does win, like me and Rory think she might, it's a no-brainer really. What's going to happen in the betting? You've got to take that 10-1 really beforehand.
Yeah, I mean she'll get the Mares Alliance in the Arkle, but she won't get the 4-year-old Alliance. But again, there's different ways of looking at that. I'd say that her speed figures take into account the fact that she's had those alliances in her previous races anyway, which would help her produce the figures. But yes, I mean you can't do it without the talent to produce that kind of massive figure in the first place. So I can see why bookmakers would take a view that that her advantage will be whittled away by March. But now is the time to be punting her, I think.
Now is the time. 13-8 for this race, the Racing Post Novice Chase, the 2:20 at Leopardstown on Sunday, 10-1 for the Arkle. Go over to Limerick now for the Ferny Novice Chase, over I think 2.5 miles, and Gabinaco is the 5-2 favourite ahead of Faruk Dalain. Vanillier, one of Barry Geraghty, 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty's horses to look out for Cheltenham. We'll be asking him about Vanillier in a second. 4-1 as it stands. Lifetime Ambition 13-2. Lieutenant Command is 7-1. Fire Attack 6-1. Master McShee 25-1. Global Equity 50-1. Andy.
Well, if my sort of memory serves me correctly, this kind of race often goes to a horse that just slogs it out better than others. Limerick on heavy ground around this period. You don't really want your sexy kind of horses shipping up here. The betting will probably lean towards the likes of Gabinaco, etc. But I think the two dyed in the wool stays that will be really suited to this test are Faruk Dalain and Vanillier. I think if this is a speed-based track and it was all about pace and jumping at speed, then obviously Gabinaco, courtesy of his Drinmore race when he had everything else cold up to that mistake at the last, would be the one to be with. But this will be a totally different ball game. Faruk Dalain's already proven around the track because he won here last year at Limerick, and I thought he was really good when he won at Navan the other day, staying on better than two useful horses, Blue Sari and Ashdale Bob. And Vanilla, of course, we know with his stamina from the Albert Bartlett last season, he's always likely to be very strong when it comes to a stamina test such as the one he's going to face on Boxing Day. Very, very, very difficult for me to choose between one or the other. I probably lean towards Faruk Dalain, but that only would be because he's won around the track before and he's proven around Limerick. But it's a proper good grade one. There's, you can make cases out for others, but he'd be the one I'd be looking at this very time.
Faruk Dalain, the one to keep an eye on for Andy. Rory?
Well, interestingly, this time last year, Faruk Dalain and Vanillier were first and second in the Grade 2 hurdle with this meeting over 2 miles 7.
Yep.
Vanillier then he really caught the eye that day, but he got outpaced and then stayed on really well. And then he was disappointing at Leopardstown. I really fancied him that day at the Dublin Racing Festival, and of course then having done my money there, he's bounced back and won at Cheltenham. I would just be concerned about Vanillier over 2.5 on the basis that he wants a really solid gallop at the trip to show himself to best effect. And he was really well suited by the nature of the race in the Albert Bartlett last year. Really played to his strengths. He was a bit disappointing on his chase debut behind Lifetime Ambition. I'd fancy him to turn the form around there because Jessica Harrington said with Lifetime Ambition that the key to him was probably better ground. He's not going to get it here. And I don't really see him out slogging Vanillier, but I just wonder whether, short of 2.5, even on the ground they're going to get here, might not bring Vanillier's stamina into play. Whereas Faruk Dalain has shown that he's capable at 2.5 miles as well. So again, I would agree with Andy with Faruk Dalain here. But I think when Vanillier goes back up to 3 miles again in the spring, he's a horse to keep on side. I think that's more important than the conditions. Heavy ground helps him because it slows others down. But I think he doesn't need it. He just needs a proper test of stamina over 3 miles plus. So we'll see the best of him when he gets that.
Yeah, Lifetime Ambition currently best price 13-2. But let's get 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty's thoughts on Vanillier and plenty other horses taking up their engagements over this Christmas period in Ireland. Yeah, it's that time of the show where I get to sit down and have a chat with 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty. Barry, very, very good to speak to you. And we did the pleasantries over on the UK podcast. If anyone wants to know what Barry Geraghty gets up on Christmas Day, that is your incentive to go listen to that. But this time around, we're going to get straight into the racing and look at, one of the main stories, I guess, over the last week or so in Irish racing, and that is that Appreciate It could well be staying over hurdles after having a setback in terms of preparations for a chasing bow. I mean, what do you make of that, and what kind of a challenge could Appreciate It be if he is aimed at a champion hurdle tilt against Honeysuckle?
Oh, it's a big challenge. I'd say I can't imagine it was news that Henry wanted to hear. I wouldn't like to be the person to break it. He was devastating in the Supreme, and he had great form before that through the season in novice hurdles. Personally, I thought he was going to be a better horse stepping up and trip, and then he went and he just ripped him apart in the Supreme. So no, he represents a challenge that she hasn't had to deal with yet, and I think he's very exciting, and it could change his whole future career. We could be looking at a champion hurdle winner and another 14 staying over hurdles, so it'll be for a while anyway. So it'll be interesting. I can't wait to see him whenever we get him out.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's concentrate on the horses that we are going to see, and a couple who are making that transition to fences. And Ferny Hollow goes up against Rivier D'Etel. 4-5 Ferny Hollow, Rivier D'Etel 13-8, getting the 4-year-old and the mare's allowance as well. So Ferny Hollow having to give up plenty of weight here in what is one of the most hotly anticipated clashes of the weekend over in Ireland. Who do you think will come out on top?
Yeah, well, Ferny Hollow is the class horse in the race. He obviously beat Bob Ollinger and he beat Appreciate It as well. The slight negative for him was his jumping at Punchestown. For the first half of the race, it was erratic. They bypassed the tree fence down the backstrip because of a low sun, but he was very good over the last four. So he can jump, but I think it's just a case of relaxing into a good rhythm early on, which won't be as easy with Rivier D'Etel because she's going to be breathing down his neck. So tactically, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. For me, Ferny Hollow is the class horse, but that lack of experience, that could be his Achilles heel. She's on the other end. She's been very progressive. She's 3 runs over fences. She's been really good every day. Probably slightly better going right-handed than left-handed. She jumps a little bit right, but having said that, he jumped a little bit left in Punchestown, so he's going to benefit, I think, going left-handed. But she has the edge and experience over him, but whether she can match his class, the 13-pound allowance is obviously a big plus for her. But it's hard to get away from Ferny Hollow having beaten Bob Ollinger and Appreciate It. They're probably two of the most exciting novices around, or horses of that standard. So it'll be interesting, but it's more the experience for me is the key to the race.
A couple of high-profile horses who aren't going to be taking up their early bookings are Energumene and Kilcruit. But Energumene's withdrawal means we're going to see a battle between Chacun Pour Soi and Envoy Allen. And then in the future champions, the Mighty Potter comes in and his favourite ahead of Largy debut, 2-1, plays 9-4. What do you make of Chacun? Chacun Pour Soi travelled over this side twice now, disappointed twice, but normally unbeatable over at Leopardstown.
Yeah, he's been very good in Leopardstown, disappointed twice in England. I was in Patrick's company earlier in the week, and he felt it was a physical issue in Sandown. He didn't buy into the whole travel over to England twice. He thinks that isn't an issue. He thought it was a physical issue, and the fact that it brought him back out quick enough, for me, would represent that. So he should be hard to beat. Envoy Allen, if you stop the race at 2 Mile and the John Durkin, what was Envoy Allen going to beat at that stage? I wouldn't have said an awful lot. Rachel gave him a smack in the neck, leaving the back straight. So for whatever reason, whether it was the injury or the change in stable or both, something has taken the gloss off him. And even his comeback win in Down Royal, Rachel felt the need to give him a tap around the tail at the back of the last, which to me was very surprising because he is a sprinter sacre type model and if you hit sprinter a tap around the tail when he's winning easy, he'd cart off. So I was surprised with that. That was a negative for me. And yeah, Envoy Allen has a long way to come back from where he was, or to get to where he was.
Yeah, and how about the hurdle race with Largy debut trying to show that incredible win last time out was no fluke?
Yeah, it's a funny one that to get your finger on. He could be a very good horse, Largy debut, but Cork is a very flat track, and I'd say didn't play to Kilcruit's strengths, who obviously stays really well. So maybe Largy debut just had a speed advantage on him. There was also talk of the ground being a good bit better on the inside, where Largy debut went on that day in Cork, and slower on towards the middle of the track, which could have been watered ground through the autumn. And it maybe played a part in that. So I think we're a little bit of an unknown with Largy debut. I know they expected Kilcruit to win on the day, but he obviously didn't perform to what they would have liked. But for me, Mighty Potter, who was third in the Royal Bond, he's a horse who excites me. He has a lot of pace. He looked like a horse who will improve a lot for that experience. He's a big horse, jumps well, but he looked very green and raw. And I think he's the one for me that I'd want to be on.
One at Limerick on Sunday, Vanillier, a horse who you tipped up in our Cheltenham Antiposts preview as well. You're hoping for a big run. Could line up against stablemate Gabby Nacco if they both turn up, with Farouk Delaine wedged in between the two in the market.
Yeah, it's very interesting that Gavin sends both horses here. Vanillier's other option was the 3 Mile Chase in Leopardstown later on in the week, which I would have thought would have been a nice way to split them, but they both go here. Gabby Nacco, he would have won the Drinmore had he not tried to bulldoze his way through about 3 or 4 fences. So he needs to put in a better round of jumping. I think Vanillier is a smart horse. For me, I think he's slightly better going left-handed. He jumped a little bit left to his left in Punchestown when he won. It was a workmanlike performance. The ground will need to be very soft in Limerick, I think, for him to have the pace to match the other two, maybe. So it's an interesting choice that they've gone there. For me, I'd have gone the 3 Mile option in Leopardstown. Going left-handed, I think, is a plus for him. So whether Boxing Day will be the day for him, but I think he's one maybe to keep in mind for the National Chase at the festival.
Last one before I let you go off and enjoy your Christmas, Barry. A Plus Tard's return is one of the highlights of next week's racing in the Savilles Chase. Now, a quick tease for those who haven't heard already, because this is coming before, but Andy and Rory have a big view on A Plus Tard at the 8 to 11 price he is at the moment, up against Galvin, Delta Work, Kemboy, Janadil, a few others in there as well. Are any of these good enough to beat him?
I don't think so. I really don't. He was very good in Haydock, and you could say it was an improvement on last season. But he beat Venetia's horse, Royal Pagani, 22 lengths. But he beat him more than that in Cheltenham. So it's hard to say it's an improvement. But the style of his win, he seemed to jump better than he did at Cheltenham. When I was down in Henry's during the autumn and we were discussing horses, I got a very good impression of the lads in Henry's. I just got the impression that they feel there's improvement in him, that he has improved from last season. He's only 7-year-old, so he's very much open to improvement. But no, I can't see anything trouble him. Galvin would enjoy the drying ground, but it would be a big step up in class from him, from his win in the National Chase against Next Destination, to beat A Plus Tard and Kemboy, Mellon, Delta Work. You know, the old brigade kicking around winning this race. They've won it for the last couple of years, but no, I don't see anything touch A Plus Tard.
There we have it. So nothing to touch A Plus Tard. Thank you very much to 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty for talking to us today. Have a great Christmas and look forward to speaking to you in the new year.
And you. Cheers, George. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as ever to 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty for sharing his thoughts with us on the Oddschecker betting show. But we'll move on now to Monday's racing, Monday the 27th of December, and we have the Paddy's Reward Club Chase, where Energumene is a non-runner, leaving just 4 in the field, and Chacun Pour Soi is the 2-on favourite ahead of Envoy Allen at 2-1, Battle Over Doyen 10-1, and Sizing Potsy 20-1. It's all about these top 2 in the market, and Chacun Pour Soi may have disappointed on his 2 trips over to the UK, Andy, but certainly if he's true to form in terms of what he can do over in Ireland, then Envoy Allen's going to have a tough time getting past.
Yeah, it's only a sample size of 2, but the evidence is that Chacun Pour Soi isn't a great traveller. He was underachiever in the Champion Chase, we all know, and then even worse in the Tingle Creek. So, you know, that's the only conclusion you can draw to, because other than that, he's been devastating, hasn't he, on home soil, particularly here at Leopardstown. You'd love to be in the position of having the insider knowledge, knowing what was going on here, because you could have had 5-2 about him 48 hours ago, Energumene was 4-9 and he was 5-2. And now, if you've took the 5-2 and took a chance and you knew what was going on, you'd be in a brilliant position because Energumene doesn't run a course. Then it does leave the door wide open for him, really. If he's ever going to bounce back, he's going to be in a small field around Leopardstown. Envoy Allen was disappointing last time out. He was good the first day, but I don't know, just didn't quite go as forward as I thought he might. So he might be having a touch of the Sam Crows about him, in the sense that we do get to see him turn up every now and again, but not every time. Battle over Doyle, I don't think he's got the speed to win over 2 mile 1. And Sizing Potsy, I think he's better going right-handed. Most of his best forms are around the puncher stands and fairy houses of this world. So I think the betting's absolutely spot on. He's not a bet for me. He's not a horse. He's a bit of an epitante. He's not a horse I'm particularly warm to or ever think, oh yeah, I'm rubbing my hands. I'm going to back Chuck and Paul Swart today at a short price. If he wins, I'll just let him win. But I do like watching him run. He's a likeable watch when he's in full gear. And I'd imagine he'll win at odds on, but wouldn't be for me.
Not for you there. Can you make a case for any value here, Rory?
Winning margin, Chacun Poursoir, I think is the way to go here. I was surprised to see Chacun in the decks here because he came back from Sandown, according to Willie Mullins, pretty sore from that run. He made a bad mistake at the first of the railway fences, and my reading of that race was that he might have hurt himself a bit there. But whatever he did, it didn't. It hasn't had any lasting effect. Otherwise, Willie had a ready-made substitute in Energumene, so that he wouldn't be running Chacun Poursoir here unless he was absolutely 100% happy with him, because there are plenty of opportunities for him. So I find it hard to be against him. The best of his form is outstanding, and it's miles in front of all of these. So if I was having a bet in the race, I'd be backing him to win by 10 lengths or more, or whatever. Some firms will give you some kind of winning margin bet, and if you can shop around and see what the best of them is, then that might be a way in. But there are more appealing betting races through the Christmas period.
Yeah, let's move on then to the 145 on the Monday, which is the Paddy Power Future Champions Novice Hurdle. Try and find some value here. And early prices have Mighty Potter as 2-1 favourite, ahead of Largy Debut at 9-4. Grangey is 11-4, 3 Stripe Life 11-2. Farouk 20-1, Arctic Warrior 25-1. So Mighty Potter, the favourite here, just ahead of Largy Debut. Andy, does that early prices, do they tally with the way you see this going?
I could see why Mighty Potter is putting relatively short here, because he was the big eye catcher, wasn't he, in the Royal Bond? I think everyone put him down in their notebooks that day. I just didn't think the Royal Bond was that much of a race this year. I was quite lukewarm on it, looking at it prior to the race. It just didn't look as strong a field as it has been in recent times, and the time figure suggests that as well. So I think Largy Debut did a lot more in beating Kilcruit, and beating Kilcruit easily as well than quite a few of these have already done in probably better company already. And I don't think he should be underestimated either, because let's face it, Kilcruit was a 14 on chance at Cork. So it wasn't as if he was like weak in the betting, or everyone could smell a rat, or he's definitely going to need the run. He was like 8 on in the morning, he went off 14 on. So I think the money buyers thought it was just literally a case of going down and coming back. But he got absolutely battered by Largy Debut, and like I say, the numbers suggested there was no fluke about that whatsoever. I've got a healthy respect for 3 Stripe Life, always have done. He represents last year's sort of champion bumper form, which is sort of been tarnished and enhanced in equal measures, depends on which way side of the fence you sit. The Grangey form line or time figure for that hurdle she won the other day was pathetic, really, to be honest. It didn't even get beyond a regulation time, so she's going to have to do a good bit better. Obviously, she can, because she's a listed stroke group or graded filly from last year in the bumper sphere. So she clearly has got more to come. But on what she did first time out of her hurdles, you wouldn't be getting excited from a numbers perspective. So yeah, I think this is very much one for Largy Debut to prove that win at Cork there was no fluke about it. I think he's a really smart horse.
Yeah, Largy Debut, the second favourite at 9-4, the value for Andy. Rory, how do you see this?
Yeah, I'd have Largy debut shorter. I'd definitely have him favourite for this race. I think he should have won on his debut as well. That was going back to March last year. His one run for Stuart Crawford, when one of the brothers who rode him that day probably made the mistake in keeping him to the inside of the track on the worst of the ground in the straight, and he was beaten, but he ran very well, and he's as Andy's said already, there's absolutely no fluke about his defeat of Kilcruit at Cork, and the time figure is excellent. The way he went about that was really impressive. I think when you're looking at novice hurdles, I think it helps enormously not to get too hung up about reputations and about who you expect to win in the first place. You watch the races and you judge them based on what you see. And I think a lot of people are judging Largy debut on the fact that Kilcruit was expected to win and therefore he must have been miles below form. I'm not at all sure about that. You know, the SP was SP was a bit daft given that Largy debut was 6-1, so 14's on the favourite, 6-1 the second favourite. But he won entirely on debut, and that is, as Andy said, is backed up by the time. It's a remarkable time figure for a horse having his first hurdle start and his first run in 18 months and more. My only concern would be that it was such a huge performance. There's a vague possibility he might just bounce a little bit from it. But in terms of the promise of that debut, he looks the best horse in this race, and I think he will be the best of these long term.
Yeah, Largy debut therefore proving popular with both Andy and Rory here. Looks to be the value at 9-4. We'll move on back over to Limerick now for the Lions of Limerick Novice Hurdle over, what's the trip, is it? Over 2 miles 7, so just under 3 miles. And Freedom to Dream is the 7-2 favourite ahead of Eric Bloodaxe at 4-1. Brampton Bell and Humble Glory both 7-1. Angel's Dawn 10-1. 20-1 bar Andy. Peter Fahey's Freedom to Dream at the top end, but this is your wheelhouse here, these novice hurdles. Any of these standing out? Any of these being underestimated in the market?
Yeah, I think there was a good, very good, excuse me, Mayor's Hurdle race of the day at was it Punchestown, won by Party Central. I actually fancied one in that race, and she was flat to the boards all the way through it. A mare called the Getaway Star, and the Getaway Star ran, I think it was about 3 days ago at Thurles, and just got beat by Lunar Display. So she subsequently come out and suggested that the form line of that race at Punchestown, she got beat 25 lengths, is pretty healthy. And my underlying sort of feature or theory about that race is that Humble Glory should have won. Stabber companion of the winner, Party Central. And I think she's crying out for further than what she encountered that day. I think it was 2.5 miles. It might have been 2 mile 5, but she's got 2 mile 7 to run on over at Limerick. And particularly on soft or heavy ground, I think that's going to really play into her strengths. What price did you say she was? Humble Glory?
Humble Glory is 7-1.
7-1. Yeah, that would strike me as being a fairly decent price for, and she's quite a big, substantially built mare as well. She'd be a good bit better than the other mares in the race, Brampton Bell, Angel's Dawn, and Robin de Glory as well. If you're trying to judge where she stands in her own sex. Eric Bloodaxe, I think he's a weak favourite. He clocked a bad number first time out when he won, and he got readily put in his place the other day by what's called Jinto. But again, that time figure, that Jinto race was really poor. So I think he's running 2 bad, really poor speed figure races, and I don't think he's as good as what they think. So yeah, this race is, for me, the betting looks completely all over the place, and I'm big on Humble Glory. I think she'll go very close to winning.
Humble Glory, a strong selection from Andy. Rory, do you have similarly strong views here?
No, I don't have a particularly strong view in the race at all. I certainly wouldn't disagree with Andy about Humble Glory. It's interesting that she's not raced on particularly deep ground over hurdles thus far, having or late anyway, having shown good form in heavy ground early in her career, and I think the ground is liable to be heavy at Limerick on the day. And as Andy says, she's looked like she wants a proper test. She was disappointing at Sligo, I suppose. Over an extended 3 mile 1 and a 3 mile 1, on soft ground, and that would be your worry, I suppose, with her. She was a draw prize favourite that day, and she only finished 4th, but her runs since have been better, and that's the Punchestown run is a career best from her. While she also gives the impression that she should be suited by a step up and trip, but I'm not keen enough on her to pile in, and the race didn't do an awful lot for me, to be honest. It looks like a fairly weak renewal of it, given it's been won by some very good horses over the years. I thought it was well below standard. Brampton Bell is thoroughly unexposed and she's proven she handles heavy ground by winning on her reappearance at Tramore, but how good she is, I don't know. She obviously represents powerful connections. She might be the type to improve a chunk, but as Andy says, you wouldn't, if you lined her up against Humble Glory. Humble Glory, although she's had more experience, does look like a mare with a bit more scope. So, she'd probably be my default selection, Humble Glory, but it's very much default.
By default, after hearing Andy making such a good case, it's hard to come to any other conclusion, Rory. I don't blame you. So Humble Glory, the selection, the one that takes both fancies, but stronger from Andy, no doubt, 7-1 as it stands for that one over at Limerick. And we'll move on now back to Leopardstown. We're on to Tuesday the 28th now. And we have the Christmas Hurdle, one of the biggest races of the Christmas periods. And Classical Dream is best price 5-2. Favourite here as short as 6-4 in a place. Flooring Porter 11-4. Side of Burley 6-1. Abracadabra's 8-1. Ronald Pump 8-1. Gentleman's Game 20s. Saldia 20s. Commander of Fleet 20s. 25-1 bar. This will inevitably cut up a bit, Andy. We've seen a couple of these, Ronald Pump in particular, race fairly recently. But as it stands at the moment, Classical Dream just favourite at best prices ahead of Flooring Porter.
Yeah, if the Classical Dream that we saw at the Punchestown Festival turns up here, and that's a $64,000 question, he wins, doesn't he? Because probably the best performance from a 3-miler either side of the RSC, including Flooring Porter's victory in the Stays early. He was just brilliant that day. I mean, he just looked like a Rolls Royce. He almost looked as though he just joined in at the second last. Now, I know a lot of them had hard seasons, and they a lot of connections thought, well, we'll roll the dice again and go to the well, for the last time, as a lot of connections do at that meeting. Willie Mullins tends to run all his horses at it, and Flooring Porter obviously ran in it just to try and sign off the season in a good fashion, and it just didn't work out for many horses in that race. Whereas everything that could have gone right for Classical Dream did. And the step up to 3 miles ended up being a genius move, having raced predominantly in his career over 2 miles previously. So it's a very, very difficult race to bet in, because it's like, do you take a chance on him being absolutely in that A1 zone again, or do you think, is he likely to repeat that again? I think Flooring Porter will be there to pick up any kind of pieces that others might leave, because he's just solid. He'll go off in front like he did when he won this race last year, and he just ran him into the ground last year, as he did in the Stays Hurdle. I still think the whole division is a bit of a mess, particularly obviously now from my perspective. Buzz is out, which is a real shame, because I think he was the one that had everything going for him, and in a sort of period where we're still not quite sure about Flooring Porter. What do we make of Classical Dream? Where do we stand with Time Hill? It looks like the likes of Paisley Park and Liz Nagar Oscar have seen better days, and then all of a sudden Champ comes onto the scene and throws in a performance like he did from left field on the weekend. So it's a real annoying for me now. I'm kind of looking at these 3-mile races through gritted teeth, because Buzz is not there, and I'm kind of having to sort of like shake myself out, shake that out my system. If you gave me a bet, I'd probably go with Flooring Porter, but I'm probably looking to sort of stay clear of this division until I get the true facts come Cheltenham.
So Flooring Porter, the one to possibly keep an eye on there for those who are looking for a bet, according to Andy, but maybe Rory will have something a bit more concrete for us.
Not really, no. And again, as you said, the race is going to cut up a bit. It looks like a cracking race on paper as we stand, but we know that a few of these won't be turning up. I'd like to see Classical Dream lay it down, because I would like the division to have a proper look to it come the spring. A Classical Dream, was Antipo's favourite for the Stairs Hurdle until Champ turned up unexpectedly and won the long walk. So it'd be nice if he threw down a performance to kind of match that, and then we could look forward to that come March. I would suspect that Willie will have left a fair degree to work on with Classical Dream. And if you look at Punchestown results over the years, Willie's an absolute genius at getting horses to peak for Punchestown, whereas a lot of the horses running in the big Grade 1s there are horses who've proven themselves earlier in the spring. Florian Porter being a great example last year, ran no sort of race behind Classical Dream, having won very well on the Stairs Hurdle. A lot of horses leaving the races behind, but Willie's always been very good. Rather than rushing horses back, he's always bears in mind that Punchestown is a big festival to get your horses ready for. And of course, it took him, Classical Dream been off the track for a long time before that, but showed his best ever form. If he shows the same form, he's going to be hard to beat. But I think it's a fairly big if, because again, he'll be trained to peak in mid to late spring. So I think he'll be vulnerable first time out. In saying that, I probably would have gone with Ronald Pump here if he hadn't gone to Ascot. But apparently, the connections have said, Matthew Smith said he came back from Ascot really well, and he intends to run him again. But that was a rather disappointing performance, being beaten 18 lengths despite having the run of it there. So there's no obvious reason why he's a week or so later going to run that much better. Of course, we're looking at the middle of the next week now, aren't we? So it is 10 days. It's not. It's possible. It's possible that he could bounce back from that. So I find it a pretty tough race to get involved in. I'm vaguely coming down the same route as Andy again with. I think Florian Porter is liable to show his form here. He's a little bit bigger than he might be because he ran poorly at Punchestown, but his Stairs Hurdle win's a very good performance. His win here last year is very good. He's a bit of a head case, to be perfectly honest with you. His steering is very dubious, but his talent is there for all to see. He's very fast over 3 miles. He was likely to have won, when he fell in his reappearance. He's a little bit, as I said, a little bit of an enigma. But I think he's probably the likeliest winner of this, all things considered. Not that I'm a massive fan of punting him, but I think if I was forced to have a bet in the race at the moment, it would be him. Again, there might be one or two at declarations time who you're surprised to see in the race, and I definitely have a second look at it when I see the decks. But he looks certain to run, and he's just about the pick of them. And I don't think Classical Dream will be 100% for this reappearance.
Florian Porter, the pick for both. Then on to the Saviles Chase, where we've got A Plus Tard as the 8-11 favourite, ahead of Galvin 11-2, Delta Work 8-1, Kenboy 9-1, Manila Indo 10-1, but sure not to run. Janadil 10-1, Asterion Forlange 14s, Melon 16s. Andy, over to you for this one with A Plus Tard, hoping to back up the seasonal reappearance with another impressive win.
Yeah, I mean, of all the sort of short ones over the Christmas period, I think this one's the most solid. I've been a bit wishy-washy with a few of them. Not really horses I want to be backing at sort of 1-2, 4-9, but I do think 8-11's a like putting your hand in the till with this fella. He's just different grade to this lot. I mean, we're going to get half the field not running, by the way. I think at least 5 or 6 of these are already declared elsewhere. I think the race will cut up. I think the 8-11 will be more 2-on the off. He's just proven time and time again that he's probably the best horse in Ireland on a regular basis. That's not mean to say that Manila Indo on his day can't beat him, but the pair of them were well clear in the Gold Cup, a stellar Gold Cup with the Gold Cup winner well beaten, and he's not like Manila Indo who tends to leave his best performance to Cheltenham. He does it on the build up to Cheltenham. I mean, when he won here last year, it was just an unbelievable race. It was a who's who of Irish chasers, and he just was by far and away the best. He was the strongest stayer when all the horses had cried enough in a very strongly run race. So he's got a bit of everything. If they go quick, he's fine. If they don't, he's still fine. He's just brilliant in the Betfair, and he beat horses on their own patch. Made Bristol, Des Moines, etc. look very slow. So uncomplicated this one, very unoriginal, but it's got to be A Plus Tard. Simple as that.
Andy can't see past A Plus Tard. Rory, can you make a case for any of this lot beating him?
No, in short. I mean, obviously the one or two in the entries are capable of beating him, but they'll not be running here. I'm not. I'm not a fan of Galvin. I like Galvin. Galvin's a nice horse, but I think he's flattered by his proximity at Down Royal on his reappearance. And the bottom line in this field is that A Plus Tard is fundamentally different class. I've been a huge fan of this horse since early days. It's amazing to think he's still only 7. It really is. But he's been well looked after by Henry de Bromhead. I was convinced he was a Grade 1 horse when he won the Novices Handicap at Cheltenham a few years ago, and took some stick when he was beaten at Punchestown after that. But he's bounced back to show himself to be absolutely top notch, and it's very hard to be against him here. The only word of warning I would give you is the fact that races over this course and distance in the last few years have proved unpredictable. They tend to throw up races in which 5 or 6 horses have a chance between the last 2 fences. But by the nature of how the races are run, and they haven't always given the impression that the best horse is winning all the time. But that's the only concern. I think he's easily the best horse in this race. He's the most likely to put his best foot forward as well. He's there are pretty much no negatives with him now that he's people did question whether he would stay last year, but he did absolutely nothing wrong. He was unlucky to run into a rejuvenated Manila Indo at Cheltenham, but otherwise he's been absolutely superb. I say otherwise, he was superb at Cheltenham as well. Since stepping up to 3 miles, he's been unimpeachable, and I couldn't possibly desert him here.
A Plus Tard then, a strong one, even at 8 to 11. We cannot see him beat as it stands. On then to I said we're going to mention all the graded racing at Leopardstown and Limerick over the week, and that means we'll touch on the Mares Hurdle, the 110 on Wednesday at Leopardstown over 2.5 miles. It should tell us a fair bit about the Mares Hurdle over in March. A lot of the protagonists in the market, Tell Me Something Girl, She Wears It Well, Gauloise, Dysart Diamond, all entered, Andy. No prices yet, though, so I cannot shed light into how the market will look. But judging by the Mares Hurdle market itself, you'd expect Tell Me Something Girl and She Wears It Well to be pretty much inseparable at the top end. Do you have any view on who you'd like to be with?
Well, we've been waiting for She Wears It Well to come out since she was devastating. I think it was Tipperary, wasn't it, over a year ago, back in, I think it was October 2020, and I was getting really excited about her for the rest of the season. I think I did a podcast after that, putting her up as a horse to follow, and obviously she's been on the easy list ever since. Her victory that day, I can't remember who it was in comparison with, but she was a lot quicker than I think it was the Grimes Hurdle winner, the older horse Grade 3 race. So straight away I was thinking, God, this is a really smart animal. I think if everything's okay with her and she's all singing and dancing, I think she's likely to maybe have too much for these. And a target will be, of course, the festival this time around. But it's not guaranteed with Willie Mullins whether she'll run, and until she's actually on the team sheet to strut her stuff, then I wouldn't be second guessing anything. It's interesting that Ed was quite keen on Tell Me Something Girl, wasn't he? He suggested that she'll improve dramatically from that first run of the season when she was a little bit below par behind Dysart Diamond, and of course, she was the winner at Cheltenham last season, so we've obviously got to be respectful of her. But yeah, a lot depends on She Wears It Well. If she comes here on her A game, then I think she probably just might have just touched too much glass, but not a race I've got a dogmatic view on.
She Wears It Well, at least an exciting one if she does turn up here next week. Rory, any view on the others?
My view is fundamentally that if you got 5 Willie Mullins horses in an anti-post race, you probably want to hang fire. Yeah. The other one I would mention there, and I wasn't enormously impressed with her last season, but given she was favourite for the Dawn Run at Cheltenham, Royal Kahala, I thought she improved on her return behind Dysart Diamond. I think she will be able to reverse that form, given her another chance. And I think she's one to keep on side as well. But yes, it's an impossible race to punt on at this stage because Willie's not going to go 5-handed into it. But whatever he does run, I think, yeah, as Andy says, if he ended up relying on She Wears It Well, that would tell you plenty. It was Saint-Ouen who ran over the same course and distance on the same day, who everyone was raving about for the champion hurdle after his run, and she was stones better than him that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's very interesting. But of course, we have, as Andy says, we've not seen her in well over a year, so you couldn't be backing her at this stage. But if you see her in the decks, then you want to punt her as quickly as you can, because that would be a really positive sign. You might even want to start thinking about anti-post markets for her if you see her in the decks for this.
You want to keep an eye on decks in the next few days. 2 more races to cover on this Irish Christmas racing preview. We have the Neville Hotel's Novice Chase, followed by the Matheson Hurdle. And in the Novice Chase, we've got Beacon Edge as the 130 favourite ahead of Run Wild Fred at 7-2. On the ropes, 5-1, Fury Road and Cape Gentleman, and the aforementioned Vanillier 7-1, 12-1 Bacardi's with Mr. Incredible as well, Andy.
Yeah, having backed Run Wild Fred at a big price from the start of the season for the Grand National, I was quite alarmed to see connections suggest that maybe the National and Chase at the Cheltenham Festival might be on the radar, because he's very much got the profile, had the profile as far as I could see, going into the Troy Town as being a national kind of horse. He's now rated 159, so whether, knowing the connections, whether they'll be having a word with a handicapper to say he's probably got too much weight and not run him, i.e. the Altoga roll argument. But yeah, I'm sort of like, treading on eggshells with regards to that anti-post voucher. But he's just a very good horse, Run Wild Fred. I mean, he battered him in the Troy Town. He jumped brilliant and he stays really well. I do like him. He's just really honest, even though he wears blinkers, and he probably wouldn't. He probably wouldn't be enamoured to everyone. But I thought the interesting one besides him was on the ropes. He got beat a long way in the Ladbroke, but he just got into it was just one of those starts. He was stuck out on the outside. There was 2 of them kind of like half semi missed a break, and he was one of them. I think they wanted to get him up there and get him into a good rhythm early, and he was always playing catch up. He could never quite get into the rhythm that the front runners did on that occasion, and he was like 15 lengths behind at halfway, and he was the only one of the horses that were held up, or not by design, but held up or towards the rear that made inroads in the back end of the race when everything dropped away. So I actually think he ran really well on the ropes for his first proper bloody nose test. I mean, he got a freebie in the race before the Munster National. So I know that was a big field, but he did make the running that day. But I think he would have probably learned more in defeat at Newbury than he would have done in victory at Limerick. And I think that'll stand him in good stead. I actually see him as more as a National Hunt Chase horse than I do maybe Run Wild Fred, because I do think 3 miles 6 now, as it is now, around Cheltenham will suit him. So those are a bit of the 2 I'll concentrate on. Depends on which one runs, of course. I'm not privy to that information, but yeah, on the ropes as it stands, I'd be hopeful that he'd fly the flag for Willie Mullins here.
On the ropes, 5-1, Run Wild Fred 7-2. Rory.
Yeah, I was surprised. Well, I'm surprised the Cape Gentleman is still in this when he's been taken out at Limerick in the Faugheen, because for me he needs to go right-handed, as he showed last season. He was very disappointing when he raced at the Dublin Racing Festival, and they've kept him right-handed since. I think he's just in this by default, to be honest. I'd be surprised if he lines up. But of course, he beat Run Wild Fred at Cork in that Grade 3 in October. So in terms of ability, he's got every chance of upholding that form if he did turn out. But I'd be surprised. I am in total agreement with Andy about on the ropes. I didn't greatly fancy him having gone up to 153 for the Ladbrokes Trophy, and I certainly didn't fancy him after about 100 yards, because that's a race. It's been proven over the years. You've got to be reasonably handy at Newbury, because it's a real rhythm jumping track as well, Newbury. And you watch videos of old Hennessy's and stuff like that there, and you see that it doesn't really play to hold up horses. And he just got caught flat-footed at the start, as far as I could tell, and was left poorly positioned. So although he's run below form on the figures, I completely agree with Andy that I think he ran really well to pick up a place, because he had literally no chance after jumping the first fence. So to manage to get himself into contention after that, you do see that happen sometimes. Horses running through the field late on and they're flattered by it, but he wasn't at all. He was doing well to pick up the pieces in a race that didn't suit where he was positioned. Again, I think he was maybe a bit skinny, Andy Post, for that race anyway, because I'm not sure the Munster National was a tremendous test, given he got in that of 141. But in fairness, back in novice company, even in a Grade 1, I think he's got every chance on the figures. Obviously, we're missing some of the really big names coming into Christmas here, and again with plenty in here going elsewhere, I think he'd have a favourite's chance in the race on the ropes, and it'd be interesting to see if this is the route they want to go with him. And if it is, then he'd have a decent chance. Just wanted to ask Andy again about Mr. Incredible, because obviously nothing went right for him at Newbury last time out.
No, he was really disappointing. For what reason, I don't know. That was his first race, of course, over the Irish Sea. So travelling wise, you don't know whether he's dehydrated or whatever. There hasn't been any reports of such afterwards, but I just think he got put in his place by a very good horse. We'll find out how good a horse Signor is at Kempton on Boxing Day up against Brave Man's Game. But you just have to say that until he's proven himself otherwise, then he might not be quite as good as what I thought.
Would you ever be willing, I mean, at the price that you're going to get here, to just draw a line through that run, hope there was a reason for it, and try and nick a bit of value if he is as good as you thought he was?
No, in this case, no, with him. Because that was just my fault. Maybe I just overestimated him. I knew he was good the first day, to win from where he was in that beginners, but it was a big jump up perhaps to go and take on a horse Signor, and the market probably overreacted. He ended up going off a daft price. And yeah, I just think he was put in his place, and I couldn't see too many excuses, like I say, unless there was something internally wrong with him. But yeah, it's dangerous to write him off after just one bad run, but he wouldn't be carrying any of my money anyway.
I'm just looking back at his runs, given what he did. He wanted to hang in behind under Rachel Blackmore at Newbury, and look back at, and obviously he was always on the inside at Naas. He did show a tendency to hang as well when he won it over hurdles at Naas in January, and I think that's just a sign of weakness. You see that in some horses, and you think maybe you wouldn't trust them. I don't think it's that with him, but I think it might just be that he's hanging because he's not quite the finished article yet. I wouldn't fancy him in this, but he's the kind of horse I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him develop into possibly an Irish national horse later in the season, if they can keep him going in the right direction. But on the back of the Newbury run, you wouldn't be backing him.
On then to the last race we'll be covering here, the Matheson Hurdle, and Sharjah is the 11 to 10 favourite ahead of Zanahiyr at 4-1. Tiapu is 8-1, Echoes and Rain 8-1, Saldia 8-1, Abracadabra is 10-1, Quixelos 12-1. As the theme here, and San Ra, who we spoke about earlier, 16-1. I mean, the theme here is that these races are going to cut up. I mean, a lot of these horses aren't going to take up their bookings here, but Andy, we probably expect the top 2 or 3 at least to. A decent each way shape to the race at the moment as well. How do you see this as it stands?
Yeah, I've said in many podcasts, both past and present, about Sharjah, just how good he is when he's on song. He's run some incredible figures, better than Honeysuckle has. He tends to run his best figures when Honeysuckle's not there. And this race is always the race where he tends to go big. I think he's won it the last 3 years, hasn't he? I think we're getting into sort of further flight territory for a horse who's won a certain race for a certain amount of years, and I think this will be the 4th, because on what we saw the other day at Fairy House, he was as good as ever. I know it was a tactical mess with only 3 runners, and he didn't suit Echoes in Rain, but it just proves his versatility. Really, that's what I'm getting at. Slow run, fast run. He's just a very good horse. I've always loved Sharjah. He's a kind of horse I've loved backing each way, champion hurdles, and Okay, he wasn't good enough last year, but you can basically set your clock by him. I think he'll probably be placed in this year's Champion Hurdle again. And this will be a precursor to what goes on, I think, in March. I don't see, of what I've seen of the rest, any of them good enough to beat him if, as he always tends to do, brings his A game to the table at Leopardstown in the last week in December.
Yeah, Sharjah looking pretty strong, pretty the top end of the market, 11 to 10 best price, odds on in a place. Rory, do you see it the same way?
Pretty much. I mean, I'd be a little bit. I haven't had a proper look at the weather forecast for Leopardstown. He won it on soft last year, but he's always been a horse who doesn't want the ground too deep. And if it did get deep, that would help one or two others. But as long as it, at the moment is what yielding to soft, something like that, would be absolutely fine for him. He's still only 8 as well. Again, it's remarkable sometimes the horses who seem to have been around forever, like Sharjah. But he's also been looked after by Willie Mullins, and he is the likeliest winner. I wouldn't necessarily want to back him at 11 to 10, given you could have backed him last year at I think his SP was 11 to 2 when he won this. I think you'll get better value on the morning of the race. I think if I was a bookmaker pricing up a race like this, I'd be super careful about it and put him in short. I think you won't get. I don't think he's going to be an odds-on shot. Given he's not he's been beaten often enough in his career for people to want to take him on at least. But I look through the field and there aren't many I really want to be with at this stage. There are a few who flattered in here who've suggested they might develop into Champion Hurdle horses and haven't quite gone on. Saint Wow was meant to be jumping fences this year. I'm interested to see him in the entries for this. Willie had specifically asked JP McManus if he could switch him to fences. When you consider a year ago he was the talking horse for the Champion Hurdle. That's an interesting one, but potentially back over hurdles here. Last year's Juveniles haven't really upped their game this season, so it's hard to be with them. I suppose the one that you could be interested in is Teopu, who didn't go to Cheltenham and has taken his form up a notch this season, but even that is still a stone inferior to what the favourite's showing. So I don't particularly like backing 4-year-olds in these races anyway. So yeah, it's Sharjah. I think you might get a little better on the day, but hard to look past him.
Sharjah 11 to 10 could be bigger on the day. Good to hear Andy and Rory agreeing on so much. It can only bode well. We could probably find a handshake Super Yankee somewhere in there, the amount of times you two have agreed, which is always good because when you two both come down on the same horse, it can often bear fruits. But thank you to you both. Thank you to Rory. Thank you to Andy for taking the time to talk to me and talk us through the racing over in Ireland over the Christmas periods. Please do download the oddschecker app now for the best prices, best bookie offers, free bets, place terms, and of course Andy's tips straight to the app every morning around 9 a.m. Thank you very much to 888 Sport, our sponsors. Thank you to their ambassador Barry Geraghty, as ever, for taking the time to speak to us. Please do subscribe to the Oddschecker YouTube channel. We've already recorded a Kempton preview as well with myself, Andy, and Ed Quigley, so you can find that there and on all podcast platforms as well. I hope Barry has a good Christmas. I hope you, Rory, and you, Andy, have a good Christmas. I hope you, the listener, and you, the viewer, also has a great Christmas as well. Hopefully, a few winners in there. Please do enjoy the racing, and crucially, please do gamble responsibly. Merry Christmas.